Just a couple comments. Thank you, Cedric, for that. And when we originally started this, we were doing this in recognition of Black History Month. February being a short month, we stretched this into March, and then obviously this being International Women's Day yesterday and Women's History Month, very very topical around how to achieve higher financial returns with diverse thought and diverse allocation. So that was really the genesis of this discussion. And as I mentioned, Cedric mentioned, we do have some ground rules for today. So Nessa, could we go to the next slide, please? Just to talk about how we're going to quickly run through some of these roundtable breakouts presentations. So as you can see there, roundtable breakouts, we're going to try to limit those to 5 minutes. And these are really for networking and elevator intros. Just give everyone in the room a quick high level, who you are, what you're doing, and maybe how they could be helpful. Additionally, then we're going to move into presentations. This is really focused on opportunity and education. We have some great entrepreneurs, thought leaders, investors that are going to be sharing their thesis and some of the things that they see in the market. And really, this is some quick hits that you can then take away, have a think, and then potentially connect with these folks after the event. And then we'll conclude that you can see with a town hall debrief towards some collaboration and action. Obviously, we want to take this forward. What are we going to be doing differently in the future? How can we build on our event in Chicago happening in May? And Ann Arbor and Detroit happening after that. So what are we going to do for the rest of the year and ongoing to really make an impact here? So with those ground rules, Cedric, what shall we do next?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get it started. So Nessa, next slide, to set a little of the groundwork for our business case that will be presented by Barry Adams. This was some diversity information that was provided by one of our community members, Need2. Thank you very much for this. And again, just kind of showing some of the hard data that supports these conversations and why it's important. And so to go ahead and get started today, again, we're going to introduce Barry Adams, who is you know what, he straddles both sides of this as an entrepreneur, as an allocator, historical perspective, diverse professional work history. And we're looking for, Barry will provide some insights and experiences. Again, we'll kind of set the groundwork for the rest of the conversation. Barry, are you ready?
I am always ready.
Of course you
Thank you, Cedric.
Can I suggest we're going to turn this the slides over to one of you guys. If you guys get ready to do that, I think that'll be helpful. Okay, carry on, Adam.
Okay. Let's get started. Mark, thank you once again for providing this forum. I think it's an important one. And for those new to this, 361 is a family. We're going to have a discussion today. And that discussion we want to make productive as well. But we are in a family dining room atmosphere. Two, I want to thank all of the entrepreneurs and the deal makers in the room for taking the road to becoming the big P. Now, the big P means that you're the managing partner, you're the decision maker, and you've decided to take control of your destiny. All of us could have been the little P and been little partners at big firms, and we decided to take a different route. And I just want to acknowledge that and let you know how much I appreciate it, because I've done the same thing. Three, I think we want to make sure that this discussion is about investing in African-American deal makers, decision makers, and entrepreneurs. That's the focus today. And we have been in this world of diversity theater recently, in which we've gotten a lot of announcements about what we're going to do or what we want to do or what we think we should do, but we're not getting a lot of allocations. And so by having discussions such as this, we want to move the needle forward in saying that, yes, it's good to have intentions, but intentions without actions are not really viable today. How did we get here? People forget, and for any of the policy deniers, people forget that we as African Americans are here, and we've been here. So the white families have an average of 8 times the wealth of Black families, in the median range, and at the extreme levels are much higher multiples than that. And people forget, or maybe they just don't know, how this occurred through policy. So one policy that led to this inequity came after World War II. In World War II, we provided the end of the war, we had the greatest generation. But that greatest generation was fueled by the GI Bill. And the GI Bill gave 0 down payment for housing and free college education to GIs. The problem with that policy is that people forget at World War II, the Army was segregated. We did not have Black soldiers in the military during the beginning of the war. In fact, we didn't have Black soldiers until, end of 44 and going into 45. And so the numbers, instead of millions of African Americans being able to participate in the GI Bill, it was, a few thousand. Those numbers and discrepancies, if you add home ownership and college education to a multiplier of 70 years, you will get the impact of the inequalities of wealth. So, having said that, today there's 3 things I just want to touch on briefly, and that is society, performance, and political. Society, you have something going on that is basically says George Foreman, Black Lives Matter has moved the needle. We've come to a forefront where we're at the table, except how do you move it forward? Well, investing in Black tech from a societal point of view should be the #1 priority in America. And the reason is Black tech affects employment, it affects innovation, it affects economic gain, and it does so without taking away anything from anybody, right? So it's a complete win-win scenario because it's not a zero-sum game. And I think that is the most important thing that you should think about for investing in Black tech. So we don't know why should we do it? From a societal point of view, it's the most effective way to increase inclusion and share economic goals. Corporations have taken to investing in venture capital because they are mission-based, and their mission-based is effectively, our stock price will go down if we do nothing, so we're going to do something. And so you're going to start seeing corporate VCs who actually have no experience in the VC business at all. And so they are Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, and you'll see those across the board. So you're going to start seeing, from a societal point of view, corporate VC activity. All right, so the second one is performance. On the slide there, you'll see that we know female founders and inclusion in diversity in decision-making lead to better outcomes. We know this, right? But performance comes in many different ways. And so from my point of view, performance today is going to be slightly different. And I'll give you just some concrete examples. One would be, if we look at the 1.4% African-American male allocation to NVC and a 0.27% African-American female allocation, that means for every $100 invested, Black women get a quarter. And so when we talk about these things together, we have to figure out how to increase our performance and increase our funding. One of the ways that I look at this problem is, one, to stand up and do it myself, and two, all right, change some of the paperwork that we have in our term sheets. As an example, from now on, I will be having a diversity rider in my term sheets. What does that mean? It means that I am typically first money in deals. And so, you know, for every deal going forward, there will have to be a conversation with a diverse investor as these deals go forward, right? It's not just, you know, me taking the risk and helping to build companies. It's that on every round, there will have to be a conversation with a diverse manager regarding participation on the cap table, right? It's an easy thing to do. It's kind of like the NFL Rooney Rule. It's not something that you can enforce, but at least you can have the conversation about inclusion without doing it yourself. Because there's never, is there really a comfortable time to do it, right? But if you put it in your term sheet, they read it and they say, what is this? And they say, I would like inclusion going forward. And you will know who you have in front of you just by doing that simple thing. The second piece is, you know, I think that, you know, African-American founders and VCs should have an option clause in their term sheets. And what does that mean? Well, you know, when you do a term sheet, you get a use of proceeds. You do not have use all the use of proceeds on day one. So if you have an African-American founder or VC that you want to participate going forward, just put an option in. You have 60 days to participate in the next round. And what that does is that, you know, that option will allow participation across the entrepreneur / deal maker side in the market that is going to go forward in the future. Let me give you an example. An example would be, right now you have Blackstone, KKR, Bain, TPG, forming these huge billion-dollar crossover funds. They don't call it VC, but it's VC, and they're starting to sprinkle money across the field. And because these billion-dollar funds can come in and take out any of the activity we have in, we'll call it $50 million and below African-American-led funds, it basically will force the African-American efforts to become scouts, right? Because your biggest wins are going to find that these guys want to come in, take over, and basically push you aside. So by having this option, it means that you have to have a conversation. And the option is really additional alpha, right? Because either they're going to have the conversation with you or buy the option out, in which instead of 2 and 20, you'll get a sliver, but at least you're participating going forward all the way in the full process of the company, right? So performance, we know the performance works. We know where it comes from. The best example is Grosvenor out of Chicago. And Grosvenor has $6 billion in African-American and women-led funds. It is actually 37% of their total book. And it's the #1 performing group in their book. African-American and women founders are the #1 performing alternative investments in their book. So we know it works. Now, I'm going to say, so we talked about society, we talked about performance. Let's get to the political side of why you should invest in African-American deal makers. The reason is that there is an effort to keep African-American funds small. And when you're small, let's call it the $50 million and below range, you actually do become a scout effort. You find the companies, and your biggest winners will get picked off at rounds as we go forward. In order to change that, right, there has to be a discussion in which the funds and the family offices have to be savvy, smart, and greedy. And savvy, smart, and greedy looks like this. Robert Smith is the wealthiest African American in the country. He formed his fund with the help of a family office. That family office has done extremely well. So if Robert Smith is the richest African American in the country, how well did that family office do? Because they took 80% of the gains, right? So think about that, right? And so if you have this model that performance is there because you want three things from us, right? Experience, focus, and performance. Those are the three things you should ask of a manager. Now, you take the Robert Smith model and you say, okay, how do I do that or recreate that? All right. And the model really should be, one, we take a $50 million fund, and the second fund should be $150 million in which we can approach the pension market allocating funds, because the pension market has decision makers that look like us. And the decision makers that look like us really want to allocate to African American firms. But the family offices and have to understand that we can't stop at raising a $50 million. No, the strategy has to be from the beginning to go from 50 to 150 so that the pension funds can come in and you'll go from 150 to 400. That is the model. That is where savvy and greed can come in, right? And that is the model, the political model that takes away the bias as well, because Chicago teachers and Texas teachers, they are looking to invest in new African-American led companies. So those are the three things: society, performance, and political. I'm going to turn it back to you, Cedric, and we can participate and figure out some concrete action steps.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Barry. I think that set a great groundwork and framing for the rest of our conversation today. And, some pretty sobering statistics when laid out as such. But as you started the conversation, this is kind of a familial family conversation. And that's one of the better attributes of this 361 firm community. And so with that, we do have a panel, what we are calling building allies within the allocation ecosystem. And what we're going to do is just kind of open up the panel. I'm going to throw out a few questions, and the panel can kind of jump in as they see fit. And we'll take 15, 20 minutes of this, and then we'll break out into short breakout groups where people can do a little bit of networking, because as we know, relationships and networks are the foundation to investment. And then we will come back for some educational presentations from our allocators and deal makers. So for our panel today, we are thankful to have Jack Wyant, Vijay Mehta, and I'll let these gentlemen maybe do a brief introduction themselves. And then my co-moderator, Jacob Lebo, will be joining the panel as well. Gentlemen, are we here?
Yes.
All right. So, again, I'll just throw out the first question, and then someone who maybe wants to jump in, and then we'll take it from there. At the end of Barry's presentation of information, he had recounted Robert Smith and how he got started with the family office and what we'll call ally. And so when you hear the word ally, what comes to mind? What does that make you think of?
And when whoever speaks, you just introduce yourself, and we can show the slide of your bio.
So I'm happy to go first. So this is Vijay Mehta, I'm co-founder of ArcView Capital. We focus on investing in diversity-oriented and minority-certified businesses. And I'm not an English language expert, but in the context of diversity, the way I would characterize ally is that it's someone that goes above and beyond to kind of understand the perspective of others and to help them. And I like the analogy that we've often heard, probably, that diversity is being asked to the party while inclusion is being asked to dance. at the party, and I think allies are really the folks that ask others to dance. So I'll pause there.
But BJ, introduce yourself and why you're at this table.
So we're neighbors, Mark, and so
That's not good enough. That's not good enough.
I view 361 Firm as a family, and in terms of why I'm here, I've worked at a family office. It's called Ziff Brothers Investments in New York for the past couple of decades. We focused on investing in what we called capital vacuums while at Ziff Brothers. We launched ArcView with the backing of the family to invest in what we believe is the largest capital vacuums that we've encountered in our career and across the economy, and that's in diversity-oriented businesses. And some common principles that kind of guide ArcView are that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And that diverse teams, as Barry mentioned, can drive better investment results or alpha. So we look at ArcView for businesses that are great on a standalone basis, but where a focus on diversity really makes them better. And so this includes companies that are positioned for the demographic shift that we know is taking place in the U.S., where the minority population will become majority within our lifetimes, businesses that have tax and regulatory incentives for promoting diversity, and then companies that are mispriced or misunderstood because of a minority certification. And then our ultimate goal at ArcView is to have an economy that appropriately reflects the diversity of its population. So as Barry and others will know from stats, minorities represent 40% of the population today, but only 5% of corporate revenues in the economy go towards minority businesses. And we think reaching parity with where the population is a $1 trillion opportunity. So we should all be working towards that goal. So I'll pause.
Very much, Vijay. Any other panelists have a thought on what an ally may mean before moving to the next question?
Cedric, Jack Lyon here. I think of comrade and partner in response to that term. And I do so on the basis of about a half century plus of experience that has caused me to develop an ingrained favorable view of DEI. I have observed it in a number of settings that have been up close and personal, ranging from 54 years ago, being the first president of the first American white fraternity on a college campus to pledge an African-American student. And 30 years later, I founded Blue Chip Opportunity Fund, which was one of the first venture entities or funds created to invest in minority and women-led businesses. And interestingly, a $12 million fund spawned, which was invested in 10 companies, spawned $300 million of value, a large piece of which was a broadcast company that I started then, but was run and led by an African-American group of executives, and led that company, Blue Chip Broadcast, ended up owning and operating 20 urban stations, and it was sold for about 180 million of the 300 that we created. So personal experience observing the role of diversity, but also the role that it plays with respect to the leadership of enterprises. For almost all of the half century, I've been married to the same person, and she was the first woman hired by a major corporation in the United States. That was Procter & Gamble. She went on to crack the glass ceiling in various ways over a 20-year period, after which she created a venture firm that focused only on women and minorities in response to her annoyance that there wasn't enough of such enterprise. That was about 30 years ago. She also created a real estate development company of which she's still the CEO. So I've observed her for this 49 years having to work harder, smarter, better in order to keep up with the boys all around her, boys that I knew. And perhaps the most overarching contribution to my sensitivities, other than all of this, which has been closer and more personal, is that one of our 4 children spent 8 years in the Obama White House and was lured by the president to join him for 4 years at the foundation. So we've had a 12-year intimate window into not only the genius who is Barack Obama, but also the management culture that he developed and administered. And I have been in awe of him as a role model, as well as various smart leaders around him. So whether it's more recently having a window into the leader of the nation, or 50 years ago pledging a Black student, or in the middle of it all, starting a firm that invested specifically in persons who would give rise to diverse management environments. I'm here because of 50 years worth of evidence that causes me to be a believer. And I'm only a believer not out of kindness or love or affection, although that's certainly an important part of my genetic makeup. But I'm a believer because of observing favorable results.
Thank you very much for that, Jack. Very, very insightful. Your history of participation in this space, as well as your wife, is quite impressive and appreciated. So with that kind of being a bridge, with VJ kind of currently, and that is definitely what I would consider allyship. So maybe a next question. Does anyone have recommendations of how other allocators can be strong allies and find aligned partners in the Black, brown, or female community?
I'm happy to take that one. And it kind of ties into the first question of what does it mean to be an ally? And I've just built on Barry's comment to just stand up and do it myself. And that's sort of what it's going to take from time to time. Roll up your sleeves, do it yourself. And as Barry had mentioned, putting in covenants within term sheets and documentation around diversity. I have been investing in Detroit, Michigan the past 5 years, and I actually find myself removing covenants when I do real estate. Believe it or not, there are still in the county next to Wayne County, Washtenaw County. I do own some property there, and you will find racially restricted covenants around owning property in these documentation. So that's just one specific example that we really see with redlining and all of the elements that this country has done to restrict equitable ownerships. I see that now in sort of, acquiring and operating real estate. So while Barry is trying to add these things in, I'm trying to break this system. And I would just say that's one specific example of trying to be a better ally with regards to allocation.
Great, thank you, Jacob. Any other comment on that question before the last question from the panel?
One other thing I would mention along the same lines of changing regulation is figuring out kind of how we got to this place of misallocation of capital across the economy. And it started with kind of redlining back, many decades ago. But what I would posit is that we need to change kind of the restrictions that may prevent new managers and new companies from forming. So things like minimum GP commit, perhaps it's not the dollar amount, but a percentage to show that there really is skin in the game, even if it might be a modest dollar amount. I think track record, making sure that, just because someone hasn't been in the sole seat to have a portable track record we don't restrict or exclude companies on that basis. I think we're going to need to be a little more flexible to kind of overcompensate for kind of how we got here to begin with.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Taking a look at is diversity and inclusion and the equity that we are attempting to build, is that just coming from people of color investing the same way that we've been doing, or are we really going to look at through a new lens and new ways of assessing where capital is being allocated to? Jacob, before we transition, we're trying to stay on schedule into our breakouts. Was there anything else we wanted to put out there with the panel before coming back to them maybe a little later?
That's a great question. I think we can open it up to the audience. If there's anybody that wants to make a comment, some of the maybe successes that they've had. Myself, I come from a diverse allocator doing diverse allocation. So it's quite a unique place to be in. And if anyone else in the audience has any comments to share, now would be the time. And then we'll do a couple minutes with this, and then we'll head to the breakouts.
Can I ask you then, Jay, you came from a UAE, an Abu Dhabi family, which is the only matriarch at the head in the country. How did that change the dynamic of allocation?
So tremendously. We don't seek alpha. I mean, that our goals are how many families do we support and impact. That was one of the simplest, most straightforward benchmarks that we would have. And certainly we look at financial performance and these types of things, but really taking the view of, yes, we want to do well, but we also have to help support our communities. That was a strong ethos that was really affecting me early in my career, and all of that with impact investment in these types of things. So it's just a much different way that you view success, right? At the end of the day.
Well, I'm ready to launch breakouts if you want to be only 5 minutes behind schedule.
Yeah.
So they've devised this so it's random. So you're going to meet 8 or 9 random people.
Now we have some presentations with some great entrepreneurs, thought leaders. As you can see, first we have Karen Levert. Karen?
Yes, Jacob, I'm here.
Wonderful.
So
Please.
someone's advancing the slides for us then, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So welcome everyone. It's great to be here and have the opportunity to chat with you for a few minutes. My name is Karen Levert, and I'm a venture partner at Pappas Capital, but on my way to be a managing partner of Levert Ventures. And Levert is, if you know any French, it's French for the green, and also early. And so we're an early stage ag tech fund. Next. We're focused on ag tech mainly because you all know we have dwindling natural resources. There's climate change, shifts in eating habits. So we have significant challenges, which also brings substantial investment opportunities. Next. So I mentioned Pappas Capital. So Art Pappas started Pappas Capital 27 years ago. You can see on the left side, it's a typical venture fund. And they also have these specialized funds that they help get underway, and I'm one of them. So I mentioned a specific focus in ag tech. They're in late stage drug development, but I wanted to do something under a portfolio that had been really successful. Next, ag tech, time and place are right. When we talk about ag, you may or may not know, but our overall food production needs to increase 70% between now and 2050. And it's not only because of population growth, but also because of the, if you look at fast shifting consumer preferences, we are wanting higher quality food, 1. 2, we're using a lot of our plants for other reasons. So ethanol, we're using corn, but we've been doing that since the 70s, puts pressure on our plant system. Many of you eat alternative meats. A lot of those are plants, so more pressure on our plant system. So this is why time and place are right. I'm a technologist. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Another great reason to be in this space as a fund is because of the last bullet. The corporate R&D is being bolstered by acquisitive growth. Next. So when we talk about ag tech, we've had some exited investments already. Vindara, just to give you a little snippet. So they were really involved in making sure seeds grow better in the indoor growing environments. So Calera acquired them. Imbrex, can you imagine inoculating chicks one by one? They inoculated the egg, and it was a Pfizer acquisition. Next. So this fund is a $50 million fund. I'll talk about the sectors, early stage seed and Series A, North America. Next. And the reason I really became interested in early stage, I've been commercializing early stage technologies for 20 years. But what I really realized, and this is data that we built, close to 7 billion deal value over 135 transactions. These active acquirers on the right acquired most of those companies that had minimal to no revenue. So we're not talking long plays of companies being in the space for 10 years before a transaction happens. Next. And we've got strong network for deal flow. The folks on the left, some of them are LPs. On the right, we have tremendous university relationships. However, we won't be investing at a proof of concept stage. Next. And just a little bit on in sector focus. Precision ag, if you hear that, it means kind of the IT of ag, machine learning, artificial intelligence, crop protection. We want to use less chemicals. So biologicals for pest control and disease. And last, indoor growing environments give us way more capacity than we have otherwise. Next. We have a great team. I won't go into detail here. Deep backgrounds in tech commercialization, ag biotech, precision ag, and animal tech. Next. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate the time.
Very much, Karen. As Mark likes to say, I feel smarter now about ag tech. And
that was right on time. That was great.
Yeah, and we will provide an opportunity for the audience for questions at the end of the presentations. And we'll move on to our second presenter, Mr. Sherman Williams with AIN Ventures.
Yep, absolutely. Give me one sec. Boop, boop, boop. There you go. All right, cool. My name is Sherman Williams. I, along with my co-founder, Emily McMahon, have launched AIN Ventures, where we invest in those who dare. So who we are seed stage investors at the intersection of dual use and deep technology. We have a separate initiative where we invest in top tier veteran-led startups. So what do I mean by dual use? Those are companies that have both a commercial and a government application. And veterans obviously kind of speak for themselves. That's a separate initiative though. Our vision is to invest in founders who are, helping our country overcome its toughest challenges now into the future. Sorry. So who do we invest in? Let me distill that down even more. I told you about the government and commercial application standpoint. We actually prefer that the majority of the revenue from the companies come from outside the government, but the government represents strong non-dilutive funding into the companies. And the next slide, I'll get to how approximately $500 billion has recently come down the pipe in the last, I guess you call it about 4 or 5 months from the government in order to bring R&D type funding to early stage technology startups. When we talk about deep tech, I have many examples down below here, but it's really companies that are out of the R&D phase, but do not yet have wide scale commercial adoption. And in that interim period, they're great candidates for non-dilutive government funding. And these are companies that will both disrupt existing markets and potentially create new markets. So space technology all the way down through defense technology are the areas that we focus on. And as far as veteran-led startups, 22 million veterans in the United States. There's increasingly have a diverse set of technical skills, et cetera. If you think about cybersecurity, Cyber Command is something that started right when I was getting out of the military. I'm now starting to see a ton of entrepreneurs come from that sector. And we have unique access to top tier veteran entrepreneurs. So this is a truly unique opportunity. Here on the top left of the screen, I talk about how This is the $200 billion plus U.S. Investment and Competition Act, which just passed the House February 4th. It passed the Senate last June of 2021. And if you include that plus the infrastructure bill, what you're seeing is a lot of non-dilutive funding coming down from the U.S. government. The U.S. government often seeks commercial partners in that, and we at AIN represent a deep tech investor that will, help out with respect to dollar for dollar matching. The government will say, hey, for every dollar we give, you need to go out and find a private investor to company X, and we will vet that company, and we represent that private capital. What is driving all this? Well, this deck was done back on, I think I revised this back on February the 13th. February 24th changed the world. We were talking about this before, about the great power competition between the United States and China and Russia. Obviously, it's a naked competition now. Everything's kind of out in the open. And so us being in a different world, what does that mean? You really saw the technological innovation that occurred post-World War I and as a result of World War II completely changed humanity. We believe that we're seeing something similar being revived due to the great power competition between really the US and China, to a lesser degree Russia. Obviously, it's a little bit more military with Russia, but even that is not, we've seen underperformance with respect to their military, so they're not necessarily a peer adversary at this point. And then I go in, before, also below is the increasing technical skills that veterans are garnering, and we're taking advantage of that to invest in those folks to start companies. This right here is my co-founder and I. My co-founder, she comes with early stage startup and founder experience. Had a nice exit for $250 million. Ran a veteran entrepreneurship incubator program there in the DC area. Couple Bronze Stars. She's a West Point grad. Me, I come with the early stage investment experience. I have an M&A background in the life sciences space. Naval Academy graduate, did multiple deployments in the Navy. And so, we're, like it says it below, we're unique investors identifying these paradigm shifting technologies. So what makes us unique? Well, we have a very unique network that's rooted in Service Academy graduates. We custom built a syndicate of graduates from the 5 U.S. military service academies to help with respect to sourcing, diligencing, and providing post-investment support to the companies that we invest in. And we have tremendous contacts within the intelligence agencies and some of the civilian agencies like NASA that help us with respect to building sustainable proprietary deal flow pipeline. And then, of course, we have access to the top 1% of veterans, as I mentioned before. One thing I want to say is that we intentionally identify underestimated minority founders that fit within our thesis. There's some really strong things that can happen with respect to the 8A contracting program. If you are a minority, woman, or service disabled veteran, we've invested in each of those kinds of folks thus far. So not just non-dilutive funding, but they're able to get actual, government contracts. And then we have a tremendous amount of experience. I come with the early stage investing experience and deep finance experience. Emily comes with the entrepreneurship experience. And we combine that together to provide best-in-class support to our companies that we find. And that's AIN Ventures.
All right.
Thank you, Sherman. If you could hand back screen share. Next, we'll present Barry.
Barry who? Barry shared a fun fact yesterday.
Yep.
I'll keep it. We're short on time, so keep going.
Okay. Barry Adams, Prairie Crest Capital. Next. So our future is in deep in science tech. We use a venture lab kind of process in which we talk to and commercialize new activity out of Techstars and other accelerators, but also colleges and universities. And we bring these commercializations to the marketplace. So if we go next, we get some examples. I'm going to start with Luke, which is natural fiber welding, which we presented before to the 361 family. Sherman, that is a Department of Defense technology. The first thing he did was make fabric for the military that would automatically charge your cell phones in combat areas, right? And he came out and commercialized his use of making fabrics to making vegan leather, vegan plastic, and vegan cotton. We met Luke in Des Moines, Iowa, and we helped him for about 18 months before investing. And with Luke, we were the first money in as an institutional firm. And since we invested, Ralph Lauren invested, Allbirds invested, and Smart Shirts, which makes Calvin Klein and shirts and others invested. And then the next round, BMW and Patagonia invested. VJ Arel is a company we invested in. I met VJ actually, he was couch surfing in Kansas City, self-taught coder, no traction. I took him out to dinner and I asked him, what's the matter? He said, I just got a $2 million offer from Louis Dreyfus to digitize international payments by phone, and I turned it down. I said, wait a second, you telling me you turned down $2 million and you're couch surfing? He said, yeah. What they want me to do is digitize the end of the process, not the beginning, and I want to digitize the whole thing. So with VJ, we took him to Silicon Valley. He presented, won the competition, and turned down the $250,000 he won. And the reason he turned it down is, as a minority founder, he didn't feel his worth was being represented by that investment group. So we then took him to Maersk. Maersk tried to buy him out early. We stopped that transaction, and we took him to CEO school, and after graduating the CEO school, as we call it for him, we got the Cargill family and the Walton family to both invest, and the Walton family just closed another $5 million round with him. Ben Lefebvre you'll hear from next, and Ben is here on the call, a tenacious entrepreneur. Ben has developed through his knowledge base to become the only MSO in the country, and by doing that has partnered with American Heart Association and Johnson & Johnson, and he's in the middle of his raise. One investor has offered to take out the whole thing, and then Nicole Bishop, which I think is one of the most talented ladies I've met, and she is here with us as well. And I just think the possibilities of what she's developing is so dynamic that I will let her explain it herself, because I won't do it justice. The deep tech piece is going forward, and Prairie Crest Capital, we use a special purpose vehicle model, and so we tend to be pretty close to our investments, right? And so we're excited. Next, what's the next slide? Okay, the deep tech piece of this, the problem orientation, the convergence of technologies. I can give you examples. There's a company in Iowa that has developed out of a piece of corn a alternative preservative, and that alternative preservative is now being tested by some of the biggest food companies in the country. Another one is corn and peas and wheat fertilized naturally by air, but a company there has ways to preserve the natural fertilizer in these activities, where they can take these products to Mars and beyond by keeping it for 2-3 years in space. So these are some of the things that we're looking at and investing in, and you know, and it's really impact and changing the world kind of technologies. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Great. Thank you, Barry. I'm on mute. There we go. Thank you, Barry, for that. Very informative. Next up, Gerald.
Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Gerald Beecham. Next slide, please. It's great to meet everyone here. I am the managing partner for Workbox Ventures. We are, if you go to the next slide, spinning up a $25 million seed and Series A venture fund focused on future of work. Workbox Holdings is a co-working and accelerator, which I'll get to on the next slide. But we basically define the future of work as, you know, both people, which is human capital, obviously, places, property technology, and processes, financial technology. So as I think we've all experienced, and we're experiencing obviously right now, the pandemic has accelerated C-level shifts in how humans kind of work, play, and interact. Where we work, I don't think we're ever going back to, you know, office 5 days a week, maybe even going to fewer days as a work week. It's kind of kicked around, but I think we're here in a hybrid flex world for the foreseeable future, and that changes the tools and technologies that we're going to use to interact with one another. As well, how we connect. You know, the water cooler talk is not going to happen anymore in the same way it used to. And so how we develop those deep relationships with our coworkers is going to change, and technology is going to be a core component of that, as well as that intersecting with flex space and hybrid type of environments. And then on the productivity side, as we think about it, there's a lot of intersection. If you think about the property technology and financial technology that allow us to do our work, that will really drive a lot of productivity going forward. I think with the less commute and leveraging more technology to facilitate transactions, both internally as well as with our customers and clients and suppliers, it will transform how we operate. So going to the next slide, if you would. Just to step back for a moment, Workbox Holdings is kind of 3 different businesses in one. So if you think real estate, co-working, if you will, as a core office space provider, then we have services, which are all the things that early stage and growth companies need to be successful, from kind of approved vendor lists of accountants and marketing and legal support, as well as, you know, more soft skills as far as accelerators and mentoring and mastermind sessions with fellow founders and leaders of their respective organizations. So Workbox Holdings, if you think about kind of the analogy I use is, if WeWork and Y Combinator had a kid, that would be kind of like the Workbox business. And then I'm standing up the venture fund to really provide support and capital in addition to our venture network to our over 100 members. Workbox was founded in 2019 by veterans of Brookfield Asset Management, who are really innovating the co-working and flexible office model in more of an asset-light kind of approach. So we have 4 offices, 4 locations here in Chicagoland, a little over 30,000 square feet of office space. We have over 100 members, and this is all during COVID. So we've had great success kind of going along that path. If you look at just co-working for context, is roughly 2%, flexible space is roughly 2% of the office square footage globally today. JLL predicts that it will be over 30% of office space over the next 7 years, by 2030. So as we are investing in growing our core footprint and services, we are then seeing a lot of deal flow already, and we want to spin up a fund to be able to better support our members going forward. If you go to the next slide, please. So within that, you know, we have obviously human capital. I'll run through this quickly, but within the human capital, obviously we're investing in companies that are really challenging how we source, retain, and maximize talent performance. If you've been on any of the calls like Gary did yesterday, Gary Bowles did yesterday, there are a lot of complete secular shifts that are happening within, you know, as we're all experiencing, that we are seeing a number of opportunities, both from co-working OTAs as well as things that make the recruiting and hiring process more efficient. The onboarding process, I think we all probably use different solutions like Asana and ClickUp to manage the onboarding process for both employees as well as clients. So that's completely transforming how we just manage and interact with one another. And the prop tech side, it is one of the most antiquated industries I've ever come across. And so both within property and financial technology, the bowels of those industries are very antiquated. So how we think about utilizing space, accessing space, streamlining inefficiencies in both the physical space as well as the I think I'm getting late on time. And then within financial technology, we are really focused on investing in companies that are helping reduce friction effectively. I think we all experience that in a lot of different ways as well. But in speeding transaction timing, eliminating waste, and improving service and minimizing cybersecurity. If we go to the next slide, and I'll bang through these real quick. As you know, a lot of money has been invested in this space over the last few years. A lot of these tools that we use daily, Slack, Zoom, and Dropbox, but several of these members of these unicorns that have had great success are both members of Workbox as well as partners and vendors. We go to the next slide. The point I'll make here is within this our cohort, 8 of our members have raised $35 million in 10 seed and Series A rounds over the last 2 years. We go to the next slide. So we're seeing good deal flow in spaces where we're focused and in sectors that we're focused on. This is me and my partners. John Wallace is the founder of Workbox and also general partner, as well as Kyle O'Connor. He's a partner as well. I control almost half of the GP. So the beauty of this is it is still a diverse fund and will meet a lot of the needs there. And then the last page just kind of has our general kind of fund terms that are pretty standard. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerald. Interesting. And next, our final presentation for this segment would be Leonard Stokes.
Thank you. Leonard Stokes from Clover Capital. You can go to the next slide. We're a real estate development firm. It's been around for 25 years. Located, headquartered in Williamsville, New York. Mike Joseph is my partner. I am co-founder, managing partner along with him. We've got 1.3 billion under management right now. We've developed actively 2 billion, all in the senior apartment space. Right now we have 70 communities that we built, and those communities are operating at a 98% occupancy rate. And our employee count right now is around 220 employees. And right now we are actively raising 500 million. I'm sorry. I needed to update the info and get it over to Jacob. I didn't have the time to do so. But we are raising 500 million with our fund. Our current fund now is backed with 2 billion by Welltower, and then an additional 1 billion from Carlyle Group with our developments that we're doing now. And then we just actively sold 4 of our properties to Goldman Sachs for a pretty big number. Next slide. Just a little bit about myself and Mike, our partner. So we both are co-founders and managing partners within this venture. Mike's former Wall Street investment banker. Has been my mentor since I was a child when we first formed this joint venture to get things off the ground. Next slide. There's a little history about our track record. Again, some of this stuff was on the previous slide. So, we've developed over 12,000 apartments, 8,000 square feet of commercial space with a total of 2 billion across the United States. We have actively started in Buffalo, New York with our senior developments that pushed us to Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, North Carolina, Charlotte, Raleigh, Minnesota, Michigan, as well as Indiana. So we've got a pretty decent footprint. We are actively now looking at sunshine states such as, Arizona, Texas, and Florida to put developments there. And we do handle our own construction, so we're a vertically integrated company. So we handle our own managed property management as well as construction management for our developments. Next slide. That's kind of our active project pipeline right now. So we have to build 15 new facilities per year for about the next 6 years. And we've got 36 of our properties now are stabilized and again, occupied at 98%, which is top performing within the country. And that's just, 4,373 units is where we stand now with our active pipeline on the 5 projects that we have. Some of those projects are in lease up, and that lease up right now, as of today, is 560 units leased up of the 961 on the 6 projects. And that is our active pipeline right now. Next slide. This is just a little bit about our investment process, which is kind of, our deal sourcing. We have strong relationships with some of the top developers in the country. A lot of those groups have actively asked us to manage their property. Most of those guys are large multifamily players. And as we all know, if, you're in real estate, multifamily, right now, the cap rates are pretty low, so it's tough to add value. So a lot of those guys are switching towards senior, which is peaking. So we've got groups, Allied Orion Group. We've got a joint venture with their group for a 6 project pipeline. They manage and operate and own 43,000 apartment units. We've got the same similar deal with Pritzker Group coming, as well as Goldman Sachs. So that is kind of where our sourcing comes from. Our diligence process is just pretty automated, just based on census and tracking the demo of seniors that are in a 5, 10, 15, 25, 50 to 75 5-mile radius. And that is information that we put into a database, which has been tracked through just information on the census. And then at that point, once we gather all that information and, push through, the development expertise kind of kicks in along with our property management platform, which keeps us at that 98% occupancy rate. Next slide. This is just more about the active adult space, which is a space that we play in for our senior independent facilities. We don't do any CRC or any memory care or assisted living. We are strictly independent active adults. So most of the folks who are going to rent our apartments are going to be folks that are active, that have vehicles, that drive themselves to their appointments and push through. And our average age in these facilities is 59 years old. So usually people transition out of, they come in at 55 and they transition out around 75 to 77 years old to head towards more assisted living to fit their needs at that point. Next slide.
Hey, Lenny.
Yes.
I love you, but I see a bunch of slides. We gotta. I didn't. This is not how I usually present. No.
So yeah, I mean, we don't really have to. The back of it is just going to be more information in reference to active adult, just explaining the market and the sector.
Well, we provided the deck in the chat so everybody can see the rest of the slides that Lenny couldn't get to.
For sure.
Thank you, Lenny. We'll
Thank you.
move to the next presentation. You can see all of Lenny's great information. Ben?
All right, I'm ready. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And I think I got about 5 slides, so we'll get this rolling here. But I think it's important to share a little bit about my background. Career took me, entire adult working career has been in the pharmaceutical biotech space, various companies, Eli Lilly, Genentech. And so I know healthcare providers, hospital systems, the payer side very, very well. Certainly working particularly with primary care clinics, saw a lot of inefficiencies, a lot of challenges they had in really engaging their high-risk patients. So next slide. Format's a little off here, but anyhow, really we're a mission-driven organization. Really, the goal of closing the care gap through everything we do is through a virtual care delivery model. And really the end goal from a mission is bringing health equity to underserved communities. Because of term, I try to get away from a bunch of acronyms. There's so many in healthcare, but essentially, an individual's zip code really determines their health outcomes. A lot of challenges are there around chronic disease, access to healthy foods, everything around them. And so typically we talk about underserved, could be in urban and rural, a lot of chronic disease, diabetes, hypertension, mental health challenges as well. And certainly our current care delivery model, typically where it falls in primary care, just aren't equipped to really impact that patient population the way they go because they're just spread so thin. Next slide. So how do we support patients, high-risk patients uniquely in the space? We all know telehealth now with the pandemic. There's a lot of telehealth companies out there. You have your teledocs that typically work with a lot of well-to-do patients, payers, and all of that. But our model, which is unique, is that we partner directly with clinics like federally qualified health centers. These are organizations that are in every underserved zip code in the country. They provide comprehensive primary care. Most of the revenues come from billing, the payers, Medicare, Medicaid, and they get significant federal funding. But they're spread so thin to really have the time to impact their high-risk patients. So what we do is we come alongside these organizations essentially as a referral basis to provide engagement to the patients in a virtual care delivery model. Our core focus right now is remote patient monitoring. So many may not know what that is, but take a patient with hypertension. We have these devices that we ship to the patient's home. They're all cellular enabled. Patients don't have to download an app, very low tech light for the patient, and be able to engage them around their hypertension. We knew we could not just be a technology-driven company. We have a proprietary platform portal where we can take the data to help with insights and analytics, but we also knew we needed a clinical side. So that's really where what we built as a managed service organization for a virtual medical practice. All an MSO is essentially is we at CertainTel are not physicians. So I'm not a physician, so I can't be licensed to provide healthcare. But what we did is we built our own licensed medical practice and let them do the medical, where CertainTel as the managed service organization does everything else. And so it's a really unique model. We're all virtual. We're licensed in all 50 states, enrolled and credentialed in most of the health plans. And we'll talk about, how does our business model flow to driving our revenue. But again, we partner with these organizations like federally qualified health centers, these parent organizations that are out there that support them to get patients to drive our model. And we have a unique partnership with a nonprofit that is aligned with our mission as well. Next slide.
Ben, I'll say 1 minute left, please.
Yep, that's fine. So this is the full thing. So what we do is that, we accelerate that with our MSO model. Essentially, we get patients referred. We drive our patient engagement model through our process, and then we directly bill the health insurers and payers. Next slide. And we're really excited about our model being recognized by the American Heart Association, which is supporting these organizations. So, again, our model from how we make money is that there's no cost to our partner clinics because we have our ability to actually bill the payers. They give us the patients, we drive the programs, we bill, get paid, pay our providers, and then CertainTel sweeps the rest in our model. Last slide. And so our virtual medical practice is physician-led. We have care managers, health coaches, and the like that we built across the country to drive our model from the engagement. And so that's the last slide. And we talked about our nonprofit and what we're doing and how we're all aligned to really impact patients in a unique way to really bend the cost curve in healthcare for underserved patients. There we go.
All right, thank you very much for that, Benjamin.
Yep.
And again, we have 2 more presentations, and then we will open it up for Q&A and kind of take it from there organically. Next up, I believe we have Nicole Bishop.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Nicole Bishop, founder and CEO of Cortolio. Next slide. The Insight Cloud for R&D, our patents pending technology accurately recommended over 200 drugs that are and have been in clinical trials for COVID-19, work that was recognized by the World Economic Forum in partnership with WHO. And we've also attracted grants from Mayo Clinic, Boston Scientific, and DRIVE, the research arm of the US Department of Health and Human Services, as well as partnership from IBM via their With Watson program and Wikipedia. We bring the science and documents to life by synthesizing insight across scientific big data so that scientific professionals can realize better outcomes sooner. Next slide. In London, a medical researcher is wondering about the connections between Hodgkin's lymphoma and Wilms tumor. Before Cortolio, there was no way to rapidly understand these types of insights or answer these types of questions. But within seconds, Cortolio recommends drugs that are in common between these two deadly diseases. But it doesn't stop there. It digs deeper and looks at the different drug classes and compounds that makes up these drugs so that this researcher can understand possible pathways to treatments or even cures. Next slide, please. In Tokyo, a doctor is working to understand the rare disease that his patient has, amyloidosis, and quickly Cortolio recommends the diseases that are essentially caused by this rare disease. It also provides the documents that are evidence and sources that support this lead to help him better understand how to care for his patient. Next slide. In Minnesota, a food scientist wonders how he can leverage food to impact diabetes. Before he even completes his search, Cortolio is providing leads to help him answer these types of questions. Typically, when you search platforms like Google, you're gonna get auto suggestions that are similar to the words that you're typing in. But in addition to this, Cortolio is actually providing leads as before you even finish your search in real time. As we see here, we understand that trimethylene oxide actually has an impact on diabetes, and the researchers provided with the documents to support this lead as well. Next slide. So how do we do it? We tap into dark data that is underutilized, stored, but underutilized. And essentially 80% of data across industries is dark data, leading to untapped possibilities. Much of that data is stored in scientific articles, clinical trials, and patents. So in real time, we synthesize insight across the collective intelligence of the crowd of the world's most brilliant minds. Next slide. AI and R&D is notoriously expensive. Companies like Atomwise and Benevolent AI offer these services for $15 million for 3 years of access and up to $200 million for any insight that comes outside the platform. As well, they're usually narrowly focused on drug discovery or antibodies. Cortolio fills the gap by not only looking at the intersection of different areas of science, but also being multilingual and breaking down the barriers of language. If you have a document in French, English, German, even some Asian languages, Cortolio synthesizes insight across those documents. Increasingly, across the US, industry and government, spending is increasing for AI and R&D to accelerate outcomes in R&D, $9 billion on average spent. In 2021, AI and R&D attracted $2.5 billion in funding. And to date, we have raised $600,000 for investors that include Prairie Crest Capital, Techstars, SOSV, and Diversity Fund, Camelback Ventures. Next slide. We tap into this market opportunity by offering insights as a service in a B2C2B strategy where we land and expand by inviting scientific professionals onto the platform and then later targeting the employees, the employers where they work at these R&D organizations. For a monthly subscription, scientific professionals can subscribe to workspaces that allow them to tap into insights on diabetes, kidneys, cardiology, and even every single document produced by the US government for science. We synthesize all of that insight from the CDC, the FDA, NIH, and so on. We democratize AI for R&D by offering tiered precision. Much like when you purchase a computer, the more you pay, the more performance you expect. With Cortolio, the more you pay, the more precision you get, giving you deeper insights, such as the next drug that you might leverage and bring to market. Next slide.
30 seconds, Nicole, thank you.
Got it. I know firsthand what happens when R&D reaches the full end of the pipeline and when it doesn't. I'm one of the 12 million Americans that's misdiagnosed each year. Part of the 72% of people with Lyme disease is first misdiagnosed. Instead of a multiple sclerosis happening in my 20s, as I was told by a doctor at 16. I actually met a doctor who had done her research on Lyme disease and changed my life. I've been in tech for over 20 years, helping companies to develop technologies and strategies and growth. And we got our start at MIT and then on to NYU. Min Wen also is our head of AI, and she also knows about the pitfalls and benefits of R&D, as her son was born with a rare disease. Next slide. And that's why we're passionate about putting moonshots in reach within the over 100,000 R&D organizations around the world, inclusive of the 13,000 in healthcare. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Very interesting. And for our last presentation of the day, Mr. Cyrus Walker with Data Defenders.
So thank you for having me. I'm Cyrus Walker, founder and managing principal of Data Defenders. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the market need. As you all have been hearing in the news today, next slide. The threat activity across the world has ramped up quite significantly. We've been hearing about Russia and Ukraine, China, and other nation states that have been targeting various aspects of infrastructure here in the United States, whether it be from water or power to elections that we heard of in 2016. The threat activity in the cybersecurity landscape has significantly ratcheted up. As a result, there is a major need, and will continue to be a major need, for solutions like what we're bringing to the market today to help organizations to address their threat landscapes. Next slide. It's been projected that cybersecurity losses and total expenditures will hit $10.5 trillion by 2025. That includes expenses for equipment, technology, and solutions, as well as direct and indirect losses as a result of cybersecurity related events. That's a tremendous number. That number is bigger than most countries' GDP. So you can imagine how prevalent the problem is today. 2021, we projected $119 billion in expenses directly related to solutions, hardware, software for cybersecurity. That number has been projected to be $175 billion this year. Next slide. Next slide. So who is Data Defenders? We are what we call a life cycle solutions provider, meaning that we focus on every aspect of the cybersecurity life cycle. We have a proven track record in delivering results in multiple sectors, including the elections industry, the financial industry, the municipal industry, small business, and professional services. We have quickly become a trusted advisor and delivering not just solutions, but also guidance and insight to help organizations address cybersecurity related concerns, activities, and events within their organization. Next slide. We were founded in 2005. We provide services across multiple sectors, as I just mentioned before. We provided services in the utility, in the defense, in the construction, education, finance, manufacturing, and of course in the municipal space. And we're looking to continue to grow those services over the next couple of years. Next slide. Our leadership team has a combined of 200 years of experience across various sectors in cybersecurity. We come from various backgrounds: finance, math, physics, electrical engineering. And we believe that those various perspectives have allowed us to really develop a complete understanding of how to address issues in the sectors that I've mentioned earlier. Next slide.
1 minute, Cyrus.
Our focus is to provide a comprehensive solution. We do that through our paradigm that we call Cybersecurity Operations 2.0. The biggest reason for cybersecurity issues today is in the operations aspect of it. It's not in the technology. It's not in the people component. Although today there are about 325,000 job openings in the United States, it really translates into operations. And so our focus is developing solutions and products that help organizations to centralize operations and address these issues on a more proactive basis. Right now, our product called Data Shield is built in the Azure platform, utilizing machine learning and AI to provide inherent intelligence, cross-sharing across customers, so that if one customer is dealing with a particular event, we want to know how susceptible are our other customers to that same event. So our technology allows us to do that granular threat intelligence across tenants. Next slide. Next slide. Our technology focuses on providing the many components of cybersecurity, whether it be managed detection and response, alerting, vulnerability management, threat intelligence, incident response, into one platform that allows an organization to manage that from a central place of operations. If you go into some companies, you'll find that there are multiple point solutions that are being separately managed, and that provides a major issue because that information is not able to be cross-shared to allow for the cybersecurity team to define or determine where the viable threats are coming from. So our technology allows for the integration of those multiple streams of information into a central platform that gives the engineers or in our case, our service delivery consultants the opportunity to give the customer a complete sense of what's happening in their environment. Next slide.
I'm sorry, Cyrus. We're bumping up on the end of our program, and we want to provide a little bit of time for the audience to submit or ask any questions for any of our entrepreneurs. Again, I apologize for cutting you off, but again, we will provide the decks and contact information to anyone who would like some further information.
Okay, no problem.
But we very much appreciate your time and the education on the matter. So,
Awesome.
Mark and
Well,
Jake.
I don't know about you guys. I just like the 360 style, open it up.
Yeah.
Questions, comments?
At the end, Mark, you have to tell us this story with Barry Adams that you were being coy about earlier. Save that for the end.
I'll use code words like hip hop.
All right. Well, until then, are there any relevant questions to any of our talented entrepreneurs, allocators, and deal makers from the audience? All right. Well, if not, then
It's a pause. You have to live with the pause, Cedric.
okay, Mark.
It's okay. I've learned. Everybody's polite. It's okay. Mirana.
Yeah, I'm not polite, sorry, so I'll ask questions. It's generic for everyone. How did you find fundraising for your businesses so far? So let's start with ladies.
I guess I'll jump in there. It's been what I would definitely say would be a challenge. You know, we had proven technology, and you know, while we had this proven technology, we saw other technologies that didn't quite exist and what have you sort of surpass us in regards to fundraising and what have you. So what we did is we tapped into accelerators in order to build up our network and get that funding in to help us move along the way. But we've definitely felt the numbers that you see are quite real. The things that we have to produce and aren't quite in the same line as what I'd see with some of my counterparts, if you will. So it's been challenging, but we're very excited about, you know, having gone through Techstars, and that opened us up to a new bank of investors, inclusive of Barry and Mark White at Prairie Crest Capital. And so we're really excited about what comes next.
I'll jump in too. This is Karen Levert. Similar, not easy fundraising, and I felt like, oh, if we partner kind of with an established firm, it would be quicker. I think part of the problem is just with COVID, you know, everything's with Zoom. So anyone I've had a face-to-face physical meeting with has gone really well, and and things are picking up now, and I think it's because, you know, we're traveling more. But agree, it does take us longer, but again, I feel like things are going to open up as the economy opens up, and we've had some good luck with some strategics coming in. I think that drives the way for the family offices. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can ask a flip question to you, VJ. Are you finding it tough to find minority-owned businesses to invest in? And then maybe you could define your criteria for everybody.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Mark and panel. It is difficult because there is no ecosystem and bank that specializes in minority business enterprises. Most of the time, these minority companies have been shunned from the capital markets, and therefore we're kind of having to kind of originate these transactions and find the entrepreneurs and companies on our own, which is a lot of traveling, a lot of calling, a lot of building networks and relationships across the minority development agencies across the US, but that's a very atypical way of sourcing transactions. We typically invest anywhere from 10 to 30 million dollars into companies, and we have relaxed our criteria in terms of ownership, so we can own anywhere from 25% up to 75% of businesses, just to keep it the funnel pretty wide in terms of what we're looking for.
What size range are you looking at? Sorry.
So we look at it as equity check, because the traditional way of looking at businesses is size range, but in minority businesses, maybe the founder doesn't want to sell a majority position, or maybe they need to sell a majority position. So we look at it as, can we invest 10 to 30 million dollars into a company for anywhere from 25 to 75% ownership.
Hey, Mark.
Yep.
I think Lauren's got his hand up, but.
Oh, sorry, Lauren.
Or maybe not.
Oh, go ahead, Jack. You go first, because I'll probably Bill. I'm sorry. You.
Okay.
I'll probably take it in another track. So you go first.
All right. Well, this is a slightly different track, but I'm really interested to hear, particularly from the entrepreneurs out there, with regard to how they've been thinking about their board composition, and kind of independence, diversity across several dimensions for you guys as you're beginning to grow, and I think it's great that we've got a wide range of companies that are apparently fairly large to ones that are still quite small. So really interested in your thoughts about that.
I can take that. I can jump in and answer. So we've been thinking about it from the perspective of need and strategy. What do we need to really move this strategy forward? And we look at that from the perspective of our operations. What's gonna really allow us to expand the business, hit our growth targets, and move the business to the next level. So, of course, an investor that we partner with, we are looking for more than just dollars. We're looking for a person that can bring to the table real skill sets that can help us to move the business forward. And so obviously that person is going to be sitting on the board. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. But from a traditional business perspective, you're looking at it from a marketing perspective. You're looking at it from a financial management perspective. You're looking at it, in our case, from a technology development perspective. Who has experience in particular our case, in product development, product management, product marketing, really getting our services out across the
broad spectrum of sectors out there. So that's kind of how we're looking at assessing the need at the board level.
And
Yeah,
may I ask, Lenny, Ben, do you have any comments on the board composition?
Yeah, I was just gonna, really concur with a lot of what Cyrus said. I mean, in the healthcare space, everybody kind of says the industry is complex, but healthcare is very complex. And looking at where we're going, right? We focus a lot on the provider, the health. When I say the provider, like the hospital, clinic side of things, but we're also engaging. Just got an email today on the payer side. So looking at where we're going and making sure we have that strategic that understands the landscape of where we're going. And I think it's just recognizing if you don't have a bunch of strategics on the board initially as an early stage company, looking at that, strategic board member that's truly strategic of where you're trying to go is how I look at, a board structure. Say you have a board of 5, maybe you have, 2 investors on the board, you as the founder or me as the founder, and then an independent and a strategic. And so spending a lot of time thinking about that strategic, who's the right fit, and really looking at where we're going from a marketplace that where we maybe myself as a founder don't have that core competency is critical, how I'm looking at that. And, certainly from an investor standpoint, I mean, you always want a strategic, it would be great to have a strategic as well. That happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. You just want money that can still help support you grow, but that strategic board member is someone that spending a lot of thought on.
Lenny, you're on
Yeah,
mute.
thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we don't have a really large board as Mike and I, and if we have a disagreement, it goes to a mutual third party. I wanted to speak a little bit earlier in reference to the question asked about fundraising. We've been fortunate and there's been some luck involved with the things that, we've done. But, what the approach I tend to take is, folks are going to do their due diligence on the side. For me as an investment, I tend to do the same. So, if it's 2022 and you still have not invested in anything led by a non-white male, then I usually won't take the call or take the meeting. And that's just, how we've been able to push through. So what I've been able to do is kind of reverse engineer and look at groups who have actively invested in minority-led funds and companies. And those are the groups that I lock in and focus on.
I might just make a point there because I'm in the middle, Lenny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to get people to cross the bridge, you got to be probably, I know probably time spent, your ROI, you're mindful of that filter, but
for sure.
But we're trying to widen that group, right? So
I don't fault anyone that's trying. I just like my job is to return capital at a very high level. It is not, that I'll leave the education to other folks. And, for me, it's just, I don't understand what the problem is.
I think
just don't,
I think there are 3 reasons, and I think there's a part that for the bad reasons, and then there's a part that I'll call lazy or just not aware, not strategic, not intentional. Just like people invest in what's around them, right? They're so I'm trying to go into those. I'm trying to bridge to some of those that if they're aware and intentional. I mean, you actually are doing the education place. You're with us right here, which is great. Thank you. But my goal is to widen that group for you. It's my point. That's all.
Yeah, no, Mark, you guys are doing a great job, and this is no fault of yours. I mean, the problems that we have are the problems that we have. I kind of view it a little differently, as if I'm sitting on the bus stop every day and I watch an old lady get her purse snatched every day at 6 o'clock, I will feel that that's wrong, right? So at some point, when do I stand up and say, hey, you're not going to snatch her purse today? I feel the same way about investing, right? When there's 79 trillion investable dollars and less than 1% of that is split amongst minorities and women, that is not fair. So, I just tend to lock in on, the folks that I need to lock in on. It's no good, bad, or indifferent, but that's just, my way of viewing it.
And I think that's right. And then it falls on us as allies to facilitate that, right? Which is the point of today's event. So thank you for sharing that, Lenny.
my question statement kind of really comes right on the back of that. And I don't know if we have time, Lenny, for you to elaborate a little bit, but I think you're kind of, let's say, cutting through the mist a little bit. I mean, we had $1 billion worth of venture capital in Chicago last year, about 2% of that coming to, Black and brown companies. I mean, come on. We know that nowadays this word diverse is basically just a code word for non-white. Okay, so it's really great to, see all of these people here that, show that there is at least some bit of diversity in this. But, as Lenny says, at the end of the day, somehow there just kind of seems to be a bit of this disconnect. So I kind of want to know, maybe from some of the other people on this panel, I mean, where is the disconnect? How is it that after all this time, so little capital is going to Black and brown founders, and what is it that we can do differently about it? I would have to say, Mark, and that I have introduced this inside the 361 space before. Somehow I just think the whole culture of this puts too much prerogative on capital in the first place, right? If African Americans as a group, as a community, so to speak, if we're contributing $1.4 trillion a year into the American system, all we're talking about really not even is how much money are you all going to invest in it, but what kind of things can we build so that we can retain some of that capital. We hear talk about Black Wall Street back in the day. Well, the thing that really characterized that Black Wall Street was this idea of the velocity of money, the idea that a dollar that went inside of that community changed hand 9 times before it went out. These days, do you know how long a dollar spends in the African-American community? About a day or less, okay? So I just want to know from the rest of the people on the panel, where is this disconnect, and what is it that we can do about it? Because at this point, for capital be just so myopically focused on return on investment and not have any other consideration for how this is going to affect basically the quality of our lives, there's something a little bit out of kilter.
Well, look, I'm a glass half full guy. That's why I do this. If I thought, and I saw an interesting thing. It was an NBA guy. What is it, Vernon Green? Minneapolis he got a family office to come by him and put an interesting center together. It's not exactly a co-working space, but it's almost like a barter system. You got to look at what he did. He wants to do this in other parts of Minneapolis than Ohio, and a family office at New Jersey is co-investing with him, and it's working. We can back up the bus on that. So we're going to try to get as many things like that. It's just like when someone's got to lead a deal or anchor a fund, and we have a syndication arm that I think will work really well. And we see things that work, and we'll bring it. We'll amplify it to your point. So, I'll let everyone else speak to it. But the goals at the end are: give me deals, and I will make sure that the DEI deals are front and center. Number one. And that load the funnel so we get more deals done. Keep the impact investing going, because I think that crowd is more the crowd that has and will be investing in Black and brown women-led funds and deals. And third, just keep these kind of events going. I think that'll lead to more things. So I guess Mary, Mirana, and John have questions. I have a 1 o'clock, but I'm just going to keep this Zoom going as usual, so others can comment on that point or ask more questions, and I'll let you and Cedric, Jacob, keep it going. I'll join back when I can.
Hey, Mark.
Yep.
Just 1 second. So I wanted to say that on the co-investment side, I have a family office who has backed my organization to invest $10 million into a real estate backed asset. We have a fund set up, and it's all focused on affordable housing and all the things that this group talks about. So I would like to talk to you about how we find the right partner within this group to back and joint venture with.
I mean, really, that's the thing. Just show us those deals so we can go be part of them. you know.
Well, again, we have the capital. So
Yeah,
we're
but
looking for
let's
the right
spread
deal.
that, let's spread that capital. Let's amplify that capital. So you
Great.
get 3 into this deal, and then 3 in another deal, and 3 in another. We'll put the 3 into 3. We'll find and do more deals.
So John,
Yes.
this is Cedric Watkins. I'm here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and
Huh?
we are working with one of the HBCUs, Shaw University, on some redevelopment plans for their campus. And one of the projects is affordable housing or workforce housing on some of that land. That might be something that I would like to maybe discuss with you.
Great. And we're also looking to make sure that we're getting as close to net zero as possible, but I understand HSBUs, I understand workforce, and happy to chat with you about it.
There it is.
John, I put my email in the chat, John, so as well, if you want to connect offline, please do.
I'll put my information in the chat.
Jacob, there's
Jacob, did you put
there's some hands up for Mary and Brianna, if you want to recognize
sorry.
them.
Sorry, Mark, I'm not yet a Jedi Master.
Jacob, you put your contact in the chat there.
I will, yes.
Well, let him moderate here.
You have it. Lauren, you have it.
You'll get him. You'll get him. Mary,
Yeah,
why don't you ask your question, Mary?
Hey, Mark, thanks. Yeah, it's more of a comment. I wanted to just kind of wait to make sure all of the folks that did presentations got to answer in on one of the questions earlier on how do you, what do you find where you find the most difficult challenges out there on raising. I'm a founder as well, for those who don't know me, and I want to just kind of amplify what someone said earlier in the conversation around early seed, right? And so when you're in that angel round and you're looking, some of us come from very humble beginnings, right? And when you talk about early and you're going out to family and friends, we don't have those networks, right? And so then we have to step it up and then go into maybe the networks that we've reached by driving relationships through our corporate and our professional life, right? And then when you come into some of those, they say, well, don't you have people in those circles that you've ran around in? And yeah, you do have people, and those people do know you, but those people don't necessarily invest their money that way, right? And so a lot of the challenges have been around, finding people when they talk about early, and you go in, you sit to have conversations, and they say, well, then how many customers do you have lined up, right? What's in your pipeline? Where's your LOI? Or come back in and talk to us once you've got a customer. Well, that's not early investment when you've got customers and they're already bringing money in the door, in my mind. So for some of us that are in that early stage, also, it's very helpful to have people that we can go to that understand that you need a kickstart, right? You need a jumpstart. So how do we do that, and how do we do that successfully? So you talk a lot of people have a lot of great feedback on you as founders, for example, or the work that you're doing and the social impact that you're trying to make, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. But there's always that, oh, it's all great, but what then? So my question is always, what are we missing? What are we missing? And that feedback should come back to us in the sense of, well, we need X, Y, and Z. And it's always helpful to get that kind of feedback because, of course, as we go and we see multiple investors, the goalpost changes a little bit, of course, for each one. They want different things sometimes, but it's always helpful to see how we can continue to grow and learn and understand what is it that they need from us, right? And so this is, by the way, helpful, hugely helpful. It's been a great conversation today, but I also asked the question, I think Lauren asked that as well, right? So what do we do? How do we present better? How do we bring forth, the message better on what is it that we need and what do we want to do? And to where it truly makes an impact for decisions and action to be taken. That's it for that's what I was.
I'll just chime in for 2 seconds. Just Mary, to your point, and I seek this, but I also require it I hold myself accountable to this when I'm talking to founders, and that is give them direct, clear, actionable, constructive feedback. It may hurt, but give it straight, no chaser. If my presentation sucked, be clear. It sucked for these 3 reasons. You need to have X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, but as true allies will do that thing, and it requires courage. You can't be afraid to offend male, female, black, white, non-binary, whatever the hell it is. I don't care, but be direct and clear and say, these are the 3 things that we funded. These are the 7 reasons why. Make your thing look like that, or answer these questions. But I've done that with even just spinning up this fund. Early on, I provided some feedback to a guy who is addressing a need in a space that I know is a need and a pain point, but the way he presented it, it was not clear that the market was that it was a venture deal. And I said, look, you need to hit these 7 things. You come back to me a month later, I sent him some stuff on product market fit. He came back a month later, he was like, hey, we were having the wrong conversation, really helpful, really productive. And so we're going through that process. It's a dance, but that's what I find to be required is we're humans working with humans, you gotta engage with humans and engage in that way. And maybe over time, it'll iteratively work, but that's the only thing I found to be productive. I apologize for the run, but
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say one point to that. You know, we just finished due diligence like 3 months with a group of investors here in New York, right? And they changed the goalposts like 3 times. They needed these 3 things, we gave them. They needed another 2 things, we gave them that. They needed another 2 things, and then, you know, that type of thing doesn't work for us, right? It needs to be very concrete that we know that we're in this together, right? And when we deliver on what you ask for, then be ready to write the check, right? That type of thing. Yeah. Thank you for your help. Appreciate it. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, can I also add to on the back of what Mary just said? So I think that there is one of the problems in VC world, at least. I don't know how many VCs I spoke with, and there is a very strict deal assessment framework, and the level of risk that obviously they're looking to mitigate. You know, outcuts many founders, especially if you're a solo founder, and especially if you're a female solo founder or minority founder, etc. So those models, I think, will have to change because of lots of statistics that are coming out and lots of proofs that being solo founder, many solo founders are actually very, very successful. Yes, it is sometimes risky, but also it's within the business itself how to structure that and mitigate that risk as well. But that selection process comes similar to, I remember when I was back in my corporate world. So when you're applying for jobs, very early days, but there are those screening softwares that actually eliminate everything before your CV reaches the right hands. So it's not done obviously manually. So I think there is also that element that prevents lots of VCs from entering into the space of specific founders. And that has to change. So yeah, but there are other ways as well how to raise funds. So grants is another one, and how to get smart around it and go about it so that you still continue developing your business without the need to dilute yourself at early stages. So yeah, just thought to mention that.
Yeah, this is Luke. You know, something I think that Karen Levert said, or I think it was Nicole Bishop, something around the team. That is your real strength point to really kind of really pull it through to the end goal. And I really can't stress that enough. Your team is everything. And if you don't have a team that supports you, and if you don't have a team that are being players or making those connections, and it's the reverse on the other side of the fence too. It goes both ways. And if you're not making those relationships work, you got to keep changing them out or figure out how to find the right necessary chemistry between the two groups to kind of have those conversations. And I think the biggest challenge is not having the conversation. You know, I think there's this stigma of like, oh, you know, we don't want to talk to them, but yet they do, right? Everybody wants to have that kind of business interaction, but just have that conversation and you might be surprised as well. And I think it's real important that, you know, just I think the head talk sometimes can hinder a lot of groups between each other. And that psychological nonsense is just sometimes a big barrier for a lot of different groups. And I think you just got to just, you know, step out a little bit on both sides the VC world needs to step out and talk more to minority groups. And the minority groups, to me, I think are already bold enough to kind of, step in their office and say, hey, I want to talk to you guys. But the VC world's definitely got to, give them a chance. But I think a lot of them, they start filtering them out before they kind of the pre-criteria is like, oh, they don't have all this stuff, we don't want to talk to them. And I think that's really kind of,
Jacob,
eating the purpose.
Yes, sir.
And sorry, Luke, I'm so torn. I have to go to another meeting, but I want to leave this, some of you don't know us. We're an open architecture platform, sort of it's by for all of us. So just,
Mark, you've frozen.
He's about ready to tell us he's going to give us all $1 million or something.
$1 million. We want to figure out what makes sense, both events and then how we sort of following up on. Did I lose myself there?
You did.
Yeah, you did.
Okay, well,
So
I'll trust you to read my lips. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. The continuation, I know Lauren had wanted to say a few words about the May 3rd event, excuse me, in Chicago. We're going to have that following the event in Ann Arbor and Detroit. So these would be the next ones really focused on sort of the impact and diversity space. And so wanted to get that plug in there for the May 3rd event. And with that, I'll turn it back over to my co-moderator, Cedric.
Very quickly, Jacob. Very quickly with the May 3rd event. What we're trying to do is even follow up on what we had started already last year in September when we did this South Side tour, bringing people around and really showing them, yes, there's like some opportunity. With a lot of back and forth, Mark can give folks a history with it, but where we decided as our first step to try to bring more investment capital into Chicago and into places like the South Side. Basically what we want to try to do, you probably have talked about, and I've heard this word ecosystem being used. We want to try to get a funding ecosystem here in Chicago of funds and fund managers who are interested in impact. Okay, it's not anything formal, but basically just a community of funds and fund managers who are focused on impact that we can then use, or that we can then have, you could say, to start directing capital through the 361 pipeline. So I'm going to try to reach out to all of the folks here, who've presented today. And, as you say, if there are fund managers, people that that are interested in impact and interested in how their allocations can improve quality of life in places like the South Side of Chicago, please, connect with us and, try to get with us with this May 3rd event. We're going to try to make it hybrid for those of you who can't make it in Chicago.
Hey, Lauren, I really think you should reach out to Lysel Pritzker. She's in Chicago.
You're going to help me. You're going to help me do that, right, John?
Well, I just, sure. But my point is, I know there's 500 groups in Chicago focused on impact. So I don't know how to help you other than to say, I would do some Google. I could make some introductions, but they're pretty prevalent. So
I would love that. I would love for you to make any introductions that you can make.
I'm sure they'll take your call.
That helps. Trust me, that helps, because trying to get in, a guy like me, calling switchboards, I only get so far. Okay. So any introductions anybody wants to make is great. Sam Cashy, who I don't know if he's on this call, from Armanino, he's really been inside of this. He's also working with this group, Chicago Blend. Okay, so any introductions anybody wants to make, that'll help. Because like I said, a guy like me who's not managing a $2 billion fund has a hard time getting past the switchboard operator.
I'll work with you on that script because I think you have more power than you realize, my friend. I'll help you.
All about network and community. As we saw Leonard, he might be someone to reach back out to Lauren in regards to your gentleman with the Woodlawn development. And I believe Cyrus lives right in that neighborhood as well. So let's use the network.
Yeah, Lauren, I'll ping you. I've got a bunch of high level contacts in Chicago that I can make some pretty quick introductions for both in real estate as well as venture on the impact side.
Yeah, it's cool because also that's actually quite interesting. I was really interested in your presentation, Lenny, because what, and Gerald will I think, back this one up. It seems like a lot of impact investments, they like a real estate component to it, because if there are other, let's say, things about the deal that don't, you could say, stack up the way a quote conventional deal would, they can use the real estate as a way to leverage it. So I definitely would want to connect with you on that.
Yeah, it's tangible. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we can get something offline and do a call. There's no problem with that.
Hey, Lenny, a question for you. Does your group do new ground up development?
Yeah, that's what we specialize. Everything we do is ground up
Is new
development.
ground up development. Okay. Okay, great. Well, aside from Chicago, so I kind of split my time between Chicago and Raleigh, North Carolina. I heard you mention Raleigh. So maybe some things I would like to follow up with you as well about.
For sure. Yeah, Chicago's a tough city, man. Gerald and I had this conversation last week. That's a tough city to get through zoning, man, and get some of those things approved. But we tend to stay out of major cities. We're more on the outskirts.
Boy, oh boy, are we working on that one? A lot of that, the zoning thing. Oh my God, you don't want to hear the horror stories. I'm not going to take up the time. We'll do offline on that one. Jesus.
For sure.
And where are you physically located, Lenny?
I'm in Columbus, Ohio, with our office there, but we're headquartered in Williamsville, New York, right outside of Buffalo. That's where I'm from originally.
Got it.
Ohio is looms very large in the 361 community.
Yeah. Hey, Lenny, can you put your information in the chat?
Yes. I'll do that right now.
Well, this has been great. We very much want to thank our entrepreneurs, allocators, and deal makers for taking the time to prepare, to educate, and communicate with our community today. We very much appreciate the audience and their inputs. And of course, Mark and the 361 community for the platform. And as he said, this is an opportunity to build from this. This was hopefully the first of many. And please reach out to myself or Jacob to be connected with anyone in the community, any of the presenters, or any other way that we can be of assistance. And I think that is my salutation. Jacob, did you have anything before we depart?
Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. Thank you, Cedric, for co-moderating, and all my co-organizers as well. Thank you, everyone.